Father, thank you for this gathering of our church family. And thank you that you have led us all of these 20, 21 months, whatever it might be, since March of 2020. And you have been so good to us. We just thank you for how you've led us, how you've met each person's need, and you've kept us as family. And we thank you for this conversation that we're having tonight. Be with us and help us be connected through the airwaves and through the internet. We thank you for technology and for how it is that we can still do things together. We thank you in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, John.
Well, thanks for being on here. I know for some of us, it's getting a little late, and for many of you, your kids just got down to bed. So, this is sort of like the sweet spot. We got this little window of time, and really grateful to see you. And I think just, I particularly just want to give a shout out to some of you who we don't get to see in person all the time. I know there's lots of reasons um, why in-person attendance can be challenging. And so it's just great to see many of you. And, we continue to live in this hybrid existence. And so, just real grateful again to see you. I just want to begin by giving us a little bit of context. Most of you, I think, have been in the church for a little while. So, right at the beginning of 2019, you'll remember me sort of saying this thing, and 2019 feels so long ago because we were still in Mott. I mean, that feels like ages ago. And right in the beginning of that year, you remember I preached a series of messages about storms, and I think that the thing that the Lord gave us was how we deal with the chaos of 2019 will prepare us for the chaos of 2020 and beyond. And I think that was one of those things that I felt like the Lord just had me speak out of faith. And it's been more than 2.5 years, and that whole thing feels a lot different than it did back then. You know. And then in the beginning of 2020, um, I had all those circles about these issues for the 2020s, and the word that I felt like the Lord tell us was get deeply grounded in God for the chaos of the 2020s. And in both of these messages, I think, the Lord, I think, gave me a sense that we'd have to get formed because we were going to be in change and have to grow because the world was going to change. And so then at the beginning of this year, we did a series on the four soils, right? And the message was be fourth soil people and you'll bear fruit that lasts. And, I mean, looking back, I guess it's hard for me to believe it's late October and we're, about ready to do Halloween again. And I just want to say something to each of you that I hope you can really receive from the Lord. Well done. This has not been an easy time. There's been a lot of hardships our world has faced, many, many hardships that many of you faced with regard to your physical health, with regard to your marriages and your relationship with people in your family, with regard to your working situation, with regard to coworkers. I, think back about the many conversations I've had with people who, moms and dads who tried to figure out what to do with their kids and then finally figured out this pod thing. And then people started fighting with people, other parents in their pod about like safety protocols and how many like deep rifts among friends who've been friends for years, among family members, among coworkers, among longtime friends, and in the church have taken place. It's just been almost breathtaking. And I just want to, as I prayed, I just felt this word to encourage you. Well done. The fact that you're here, the fact that you've hung in there with resilience is a big deal to God because I think God sees and understands the challenges that you've been through. And, I think things are going to turn the corner. But I just want to encourage you. I feel like the Lord just sees what you've been through and appreciates that you haven't given up. And I think that in and of itself is a win. You know, the enemy is in this process of trying to winnow people and prune people away. And so I just want to thank you again for hanging in there. And thank you for helping us to continue to be who we are. Well, as I think back about this, one of the big questions is like, who is Epicenter exactly? You know, I just want to share a couple things. The first thing is this: our in-person attendance is about a half of what it was in February of 2020. There's somewhere about roughly around 300 people. And I asked Praise to do some work, because at least, up until about 10:25 every week, we register everybody that comes in. And so we had roughly 700 people that showed up in church between July and September. It was over vacation. People who came every week, 12 out of 12, about 1%. There was like 8 people, I think. Uh, Secondly, um, there's a lot of people that came in person 2 to 3 times, almost four, 3.8 times um, over the course of that time, and that was about half. Okay, about 300. I guess that would be about 350 people or something like that. And then there was a number of people that, they didn't come every week. And then another half that came up less than half of the time, about 46%, and then about 5% newcomers. So something like on the English side, this is in the English side, about 40 newcomers. 40, no, 70, sorry, 70 newcomers. And so, it's an interesting sort of thing. And then we have somewhere roughly around 200 YouTube views a week. If you look back at the actual counts, some of them are like higher and then some of them are lower because those are the weeks where we had to like repost, and put a different stream up on Monday. And so whoever was sufferingly trying to get through the intermittent stream on Sunday, isn't counted in that and so forth and so on. So again, I just want to thank you guys. We don't really know exactly what's happening on YouTube. The statistics don't really tell us whether there's one person there or two people or five. It doesn't tell us whether people are on for 10 minutes or an hour. It doesn't tell us whether people are watching TV while YouTube is on. And it also doesn't really tell us whether we're somebody's first church, second church, third church, or fifth church, right? Because my mom, yeah, well, maybe a couple months ago, I was like, "Hey, you want to come to church?" She's like, "Well, if I do that, how am I going to watch the five services I watch every week?" I'm like, "Oh, so that's just part of our reality." But I think, I want to just say, in whatever way that you've been with us, we're grateful for where we're at, but understand that as we look into the future, deeper and thicker engagement of people is really crucial because Jesus didn't come down from heaven on Zoom, right? He came to be incarnated. And I think we all know that being person to person and, you know, being in enough depth so that our challenges and the challenge of being with each other, that's part of the discipleship process. So, let me just talk a little bit about this. You guys have heard me say on a number of occasions that the Church of 2020 isn't going to make it into 2025. And so there's two things I just want to briefly touch on. The first has to do with sort of replanting Epicenter. And then the second one is how do we do us? So let me just talk about replanting Epicenter. Of course, we're the same church we've been, and at the same time, we're not exactly the same church. And that's because I think, when we started looking at coming back and especially meeting back at Marshall, it's like, what is the point of church and what is the point of meeting together? And having been on Zoom, in so many occasions in different ways, I think forced us to sort of have to think about this. And so I think this is where we decided to slightly shift our values. And it's really, I think, a matter of trying to articulate something more clearly. So if you've been with us over the summer, you know that we um, did a sermon series on this about encountering God, changing the world, and making disciples. And we said, this is who we are, right? We want to be people that are regularly really seeking God's face and having Him change us in the way that we um, are interacting with Him. Secondly, that we want to be really clear about the kind of change that the world needs. And then third, that we be in the process of becoming disciples and making disciples in line with it. And I think that the needs of our world are ever greater. And I think the second thing is the importance of meeting together. And this phrase from Hebrews, do not forsake the habit of meeting together as some in this age have the custom of doing, I think is really relevant for our time. Well, the next thing is how do we do us? And there's really a couple things I want to bring to the fore here. The first one is this whole life group reboot thing. I think, as we've looked at life groups on the English side, some of our life groups just thrived and grew, and some of them had trouble, and I think this was a sign to us that we want to kind of figure out what's going well and address the things that need to go better, and for those of you who are on screen who are life group leaders, again, I just want to say thank you because, man, you guys were the face and the backbone of our life, and we're just so grateful. Um, but I think we realize that, our supporting our life group leaders, giving them better training is really crucial. And then I think, we've sort of tacked towards in this next season, I think the way we're thinking about it is in 2025, what do we want our life groups to look like? And I think we realize having more groups that are more intergenerational, more regional is probably going to be more helpful for us because we think there's something to the intergenerational nature of life groups that's really important. And we also think that in general, as we can get into groups with people near us, that's going to enable us to be in deeper relationship and not just have a meeting, but live life, have dinner with each other, and that sort of thing. As you guys are aware, it's a little hard to do that when people have to drive 40 minutes to get somewhere, you know. And then the second one is something that many of you probably don't know that much about. We've actually gone about sort of reorganizing the church. And what that means is reorganizing the way we structure ourselves, the way we, as staff, are organized, and the kinds of teams that we want to be able to invite you into. So um, we basically have created 7 teams that our staff are on that are going to be focusing on different areas of the church. And many of our staff are involved in different teams and multiple teams. And so the first one is this. It has to do with what we really view as the center of the church, which is our discipleship, life group, and pastoral care. And I think this team's pretty large. We've got 8 of our staff involved in there. And so for those of you who, excuse me, I have a bug here. It's a mosquito. Okay. For those of you who are life group leaders, for those of you who are going to be involved in section leading, for those of you who are involved in doing inner healing ministry and so forth, as well as Stephen's ministry, this is sort of where you all fit. Okay. The second one is really important to us. It's our next generation ministry, right? And so this has to do with our focus on equipping our children, our youth, and our college students so that they can be leaders in 2050, right? And so we've got staff focused on that as well as those of you who are involved in Kingdom Kids, those of you who are involved in Josh and his team, as well as Cam and his team. And, we had a great story from one of our 65-year-olds who sits in the college section every week. And he was mentioning that, he woke up Sunday morning going, gosh, I don't know, like, why am I with these college students? Is this really what I ought to be doing? And so then when I was talking on Sunday about having sober judgment and about like how sometimes we can overemphasize or minimize our role, he said, oh, that really spoke to me. And so he felt encouraged. And then right after service, one of our college students turned around and said, hi, Corey, I have a question. I have a philosophy class, and my assignment is to talk to somebody and interview somebody who's over 65. Are you in that category? And he said, yes. And so he took him out to dinner and they had this great conversation or lunch, on Sunday, and they had this great conversation. It's like, cool, right? And so that's part of that ring there. And then the next one has to do with four quadrants of ministry incorporation, which is like, how do people get plugged into our church and connected. And this is also not just for new people, but for people who are already in the church. How do we get people connected, moms connected, men connected, and that sort of stuff? Um, One on worship, which is not just our worship service, but on helping people to become worshipers, as well as intercessors, and learning how to hear the voice of God and live that out in their lives. A whole training section, which is like how we equip our people, and then our minister section, which is like outward facing evangelism, what we do at Marshall, um, church planning, things that we're going to be doing in Pasadena, as well as our missionaries and our relational caregivers for our church planning teams and all that sort of stuff, right? And then we have one last awesome team that Praise is leading called Operations and Communication, which helps us be more smooth running and, deals with our social media as well as our communication to you. And so, that team helps us with our reports and like the annual report and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, those are our teams. Okay, now I'm just going to turn this over to Megan right now, and we're going to talk briefly about elder nominations.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk first about the elder nomination process and then about our elder candidates for the membership meeting. So for the elder nomination process, early next year, we're going to start this process. We usually start it around the summer, but we had a lot going on this year and we didn't want to rush the process. So, nominating elders is a weighty thing. We plan to enter into the full process in the new year. So plan for a membership meeting to affirm new elders sometime in the spring. And, we'll be looking to you all to give us the nominations so that we can consider those votes. And so our elder nominees that we have for this upcoming membership meeting is Ben Tong. So a little bit about Ben. Ben is blessed to be married to Fiona for nearly 25 years, and they have two daughters, Anna and Alyssa, who are both in college. He served several terms as an elder, and along with Fiona, they were involved with planting Epicentre. Professionally, Ben works as an IT manager, and his desire is to see the fulfillment of God's plan for each person, as well as corporately for Epicentre. I wanted to add, personally, Ben and Fiona have been a huge source of encouragement to myself and Patrick while we led Life Group, and also now as we parent two daughters. So under our bylaws, elders serve a 4-year term. Ben's current term expires at the end of this year. So at our membership meeting, what we'll be asking is for members to affirm renewal of his eldership.
Thank you, Megan. Megan is one of our amazing elders. Yes. Well, I have the joy of presenting numbers to you all. So I'm going to go down to this page. So if you are looking at the report that we sent out, you'll see a page with this graphic on it. And so this gives you the macro view. It's got in the first column what we are estimating this year to wind up at. For reference, we gave you last year's budget, and then this third column here in the dark red is what we are proposing to members to vote on at the membership meeting 1 week from today. And so I wanted to just kind of go through a little bit of, on these numbers. I'm going to start off with the actually 2020. We had a surplus in 2020 of 144K. And this was primarily due to the fact that we were on lockdown most of 2020. And so our rent was drastically lower. Occupancy was $161,000 lower than what we had budgeted. Our ministry expenses were about $100,000 lower than budgeted as well, because we didn't do a bunch of ministry events that entailed a lot of expenses other than the next category, which is our support expenses. They were $76,000 higher because we got Zoom accounts. And we did a bunch of things like bought equipment so that we could record services to be put on the Zoom tube thing. And so we had higher expenses and support expenses. But on the total, our expenses were $255,000 lower than budget. So I wanted to just sort of wrap that up for 2020, because that last year's meeting, 2020, hadn't concluded. We did have a substantial drop in projected income in the month of December. So as you know, December is our month where 21% of our giving comes in. And last year in 2020, we had, John, what was it? 200 some thousand.
Yeah, I mean, what we do every year is based on the previous 5 years. We take our projected giving and kind of figure out what we think we're going to get based on prior years each month. And we were expecting something like 550,000 in December, and we ended up with like 340 or 330. So it was a little bit of a shock to us, and oftentimes that money doesn't come in until December 26th. And so we kept waiting, and and so it was a little bit of a surprise to us. I mean, it was fine because again, Zoom is a lot less expensive than Marshall, right? But, we sort of didn't understand at that time what this might mean.
Yes. And so our projections for 2021 were based on us hitting our numbers in 2020. And so in January, we had an opportunity to apply for a PPP loan. And so we thought, okay, if the numbers continue in a downward trend, we're going to have to lay off employees. And so to prevent that, we applied for the PPP loan. Now, what's amazing is that even though the numbers dropped off in December of last year, this year in 2021, we're pretty much on target up to this point, which is really amazing. Now, because of the drop off of last year, I am projecting a 3% drop off in the income for this year. And so when you see that first column, you'll see the income a little bit lower than what we had budgeted for. And that other income line that you see in the first column, we got the PPP loan was $365,000. So that accounts for most of what that other income is in that category. For this year, our ministry expenses are much lower, again, because most of the year our ministry activity has decreased. We didn't have major things like a youth retreat that was in person. This last year it was online, and I heard it was amazing. But next year in 2022, we're bringing back the retreat. We've paid the deposit on Poly Retreat Center, and so we're hoping for a bunch of kids to come. Support expenses, we've actually recategorized most of those things into innovation. If you remember last year in our budget, we proposed a $100,000 innovation budget because we just didn't know what 2021 was going to look like, what we needed to do. And so we wanted to have a place where we could innovate to basically figure out how we were going to do church. And so a bunch of money that we spent there went to live streaming, cameras and transmitters and hotspots and all kinds of different
modems.
Yes. We think we have finally figured out how to do an unbroken service, and so thankful for Mel Bryan and Young and the team to try and figure that out. They've been working it every single week, and I think they finally figured it out, which is great. And so our innovation expenses are going to be about $82,494 for this year. So we're within budget for that. This year as well, we budgeted 100,000 for community engagement, but we're reducing that to 50,000 because we, in the busyness of trying to get church going again, we really haven't done what we had planned to do in community engagement. So instead of just, spending money willy-nilly, we've decided to just hold back 50,000 and then move it into the next year and spend it when we have a better strategy. So the surplus that we're going to get, we are projecting to get primarily because of the PPP loan, we're going to deploy into 2022 and 2023 to pay for expenses, mainly because of just navigating the complications of COVID that has just increased our expenses in these years. So,
And I think we are staffing for growth, believing that as we get back into some kind of normality, who we are is going to start growing again.
okay, so let me show you a little bit more detail on the income side. We are projecting a 5% growth on the English side of the church and 10% growth in the Chinese side. Now, in this last year, the giving in Chinese has grown exponentially. I mean, basically, they've grown 80% in their giving. And so we are projecting a 10% growth on top of that 80% growth that they've had this last year. And it's really exciting. They've hired a half-time family pastor in this last year, and we're going to be bumping him up to 3/4 time in the new year. And then they're also hiring a full-time young adult pastor to grow that whole population of the church. And then in order to keep everything sort of all together, they're also going to finally hire an admin. We've had a quarter person in the budget for them for many years. They've never used it. And then in this coming year, we're hoping that they can hire a half-time person. So we're really excited about all of the things that are happening in Chinese. And also in the other income, so we're bringing surplus from this year, as well as the 50,000 unused community engagement in order to round out our income. Now, let me go to the expense side of things. I think the main thing that, salary accounts for 75% of our budget. And so I want to talk about some of the increases that are happening on the salary side. One of the things that we're doing is we're adjusting the pay scale for our admin staff. Over the years, there's been a number of minimum wage increases where we've never adjusted the scale. We've only done cost of living adjustments over the last 5 or 6 years. And so we've also looked at the responsibilities that our admin staff carry. They do a lot, and they take on a lot of responsibility as well. They're not simply Xeroxers. They do a lot. And so as a result, we really felt that it was honorable for us to give that to do an adjustment in their pay scale. And so that accounts for about 30,000 of the increase. The other thing is that we are increasing cost of living by 3% this year. As a reference point, last year we adjusted by 1.7%. No, 1.3%, and the year before it was 1.7%. And this year with inflation, we are increasing cost of living to 3%. Also, as a point of reference, the Social Security Administration, they're forecasting that they're going to do a 6.2% adjustment in COLA this year. So we're doing a 3%. And then the other factor is that we're adding staffing on the Chinese side, and they're giving, balances that all out. And so that's really why the salary numbers have increased as much as they have. And so those are the numbers, and feel free to shoot us questions about that.